The most effective sanctions, the ones that work the fastest, are the sanctions on Russia's oil refineries, its terminals, oil depots. We have significantly restricted Russia's oil industry, and this significantly restricts the war. Russia's war is essentially a function of oil, of gas, of all its other energy resources. I thank the special forces of the Security Service of Ukraine, who did a great job in Primorsk recently, hitting Russia's largest oil terminal on the Baltic Sea. There is substantial damage. Everything has been verified, and this is tangible for the enemy. Our special forces are also keeping an eye on the port of Ust-Luga and all other Russian points of access to the world market.
US President Donald Trump is urging NATO to stop buying Russian oil. Trump's team is ready to put tariffs on China to bring Putin to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, House Speaker Mike Johnson says the sanctions against Russia are overdue. What does new Trump's demands on sanctions look like, and could this lead really to force Putin to negotiating table? US President Donald Trump is signaling a new condition for US sanctions on Russia. He wants NATO allies to impose tariffs on China before the US takes further actions. In a message posted to his Truth Social platform, Trump called on all NATO members to stop purchasing Russian oil and to join him in targeting China, which remains one of Russia's top energy customers, with tariffs up to 100% according to Axios. Trump's demand has two key options. NATO must stop buying Russian oil, and all NATO members must impose 50 to 100% tariff on Chinese goods in response to Beijing's purchase of Russian crude oil. Until these steps are taken, Trump said the US should hold off on imposing any new economic sanctions. Quote, "I am ready to impose major sanctions on Russia once the NATO allies agrees." Trump's statement comes amid mounting frustration from US officials over energy loopholes that allow Russian oil to flow to European market.
Look, Europe they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore. But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
Meanwhile, Russian oil exports remain a major source of funding of Moscow's military operations in Ukraine. Reuters reports that targeting this revenue stream could deal a significant blow to Russia's ability to finance the war, especially if large buyers like China and India reduce or stop their imports. Trump's call to impose tariffs on these countries aims to increase pressure. Many analysts argue it's fair for countries still buying Russian oil to face consequences. According to AP News, continuing these purchases effectively supports Russia's economy and prolongs the war, so tariffs or sanctions are justified measures to hold these countries accountable. Euronews highlights that unified NATO response would strengthen the impact of these sanctions. Trump emphasized that consistent and collective action among NATO members can send a clear message to Russia and discourage further aggression. The Financial Times reports that tariffs on China and India, major buyers of Russian oil, could be an effective way of pressuring these countries to reduce their energy purchases from Moscow. While such measures carry risk of economic fallout, supporters argue they might be necessary to tighten the financial noose on Russia. Al Jazeera reports that Ukraine views tariffs as a fair step to make sure countries don't indirectly fund the war machine. Experts caution that for this strategy to succeed, countries must have reliable alternatives to Russian oil. It also requires strong agreement among NATO allies and clear enforcement mechanism. Support may be necessary to help countries transition without causing major economic disruption. While the proposal faces challenges, many experts say Trump's call to cut off Russian oil imports and impose tariffs on China is a fair and effective way to weaken Russia's war effort if executed with coordination and care. As Reuters points out, NATO decisions are made by consensus, and countries have different energy needs, political priorities, and economic vulnerabilities. Without a unified approach and clear alternatives for countries still dependent on Russian supplies, the proposal may be more symbolic than actionable, while Trump supporters may see this move as a bold stand against China and Russia, critics say it's short on practical details. Reuters suggests the timing and tone indicates the proposal may be about political positioning than a realistic policy. Still, with Trump leading in many Republican primary polls, his foreign policy agenda could shape the broader debate as the 2024 election approach. Trump's call for NATO to cut off Russian oil and target China with major tariffs is aggressive, but implementing it would be complex, risky, and likely require major coordination between all allies. Meanwhile, House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senator Lindsey Graham are stepping up calls for tougher sanctions on Russia amid the ongoing war in Ukraine, signaling strong bipartisan support in Congress for increased economic pressure on Moscow. Speaking on CBS Face Nation, Speaker Johnson said he is eager to move forward with sanctions against Russia, describing them as overdue. Johnson voiced support for a bipartisan sanctions package introduced by Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal, which would impose secondary tariffs on countries that continue to buy Russian oil. Quote, "I'm ready to do it," Johnson said, underscoring the need for Congress to act swiftly. He also emphasized that any sanctions legislation must be signed by the President to take effect, aligning himself with President Trump's recent calls for coordinated action among allies. Also, Senator Graham has emerged as a leading figure pushing for even tougher measures against Russia. He has introduced a bipartisan bill co-sponsored by more than 800 senators that would designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, a move that would trigger new sanctions and diplomatic restrictions. Graham points to Russia's mass abduction of nearly 20,000 Ukrainian children as a key reason behind the proposed document, describing Moscow's actions as a terrorist behavior. In addition to this, Graham is advocating for secondary sanctions targeting China and India as they continue purchasing Russian oil. He introduced legislation proposing tariffs as high as 500% on imports from nations that buy Russian energy, aiming to cut off a critical revenue stream for Russia's military efforts. Graham recently teamed up with Representative Brian Fitzpatrick to push for the sanction bill to be included in crucial government funding package. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin isn't planning to end his war with the West anytime soon, according to a report by Politico. Despite US President Trump's hopes for a peace deal, Putin has tied his political survival to a prolonged conflict with the US and its allies. Experts tell Politico that Putin has embraced the role of a wartime president, and giving that up would be a major blow to his image. As Russia's war in Ukraine approaches its fourth year, Putin may actually feel more confident than at any point since the war began. While Ukrainian forces face shortages in weapons, Russia continues to push deeper in Ukraine, but progress is slow and costly. The Kremlin's military has reportedly suffered up to 1 million casualties. Russia's economy teeters on the edge of recession. Still, Putin faces risk if he tries to end the war, according to Politico. While Russian state media could spin a peace deal as a victory, the real challenge comes from Russia's hawkish nationalists, a powerful group who expect Putin to deliver a sweeping victory over Ukraine. Quote, "There is a strong desire among the military and political hardliners to destroy NATO," former Russian diplomat Alexander Baunov told the Politico, who works at Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center. Since Putin's recent meeting with Trump in Alaska, which Trump held as a step toward peace, Russia has stepped up hybrid warfare tactics against Europe. Before last week's drone incursion, Russian drones regularly flew into Polish airspace from Belarus, sometimes circling cities before retreating. One drone even crashed near Warsaw, and reports show some drones were headed straight for a NATO base before Dutch F-35 fighter jets intercepted them. Days before the incursion, Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's Security Council deputy chairman, threatened Finland with collapse if it attacked Russia. Rhetoric of Moscow's lead up to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Moscow has started moving key industries like shipbuilding eastward, away from NATO borders, while conducting large-scale military drills with Belarus close to Poland. Experts say Putin's drone strike into Poland was a warning to Trump and European leaders who are discussing security guarantees for Kyiv after any peace deal. Trump suggested the drone could be a mistake, echoing Moscow denials that the drones were intended to provoke Belarus. The launch point for some drones blamed electronic jamming for this incursion. That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and glory to Ukraine.